What's up, everybody? This is Bishop Nectarios from Our Ancient Faith, and today we're going to be discussing Orthodoxy in Action. It is the 31st of May, and it is around 11:30 in the morning when I'm making this podcast. So let's talk. There's a lot of folks out there that are curious what it means to be a Christian in action, especially in our world. And there's never any good way to explain it to people because as a Christian you walk by faith and not by sight. So let's agree on a few basic definitions. The first, and perhaps the simplest definition of what it means to be a Christian in action in the world today is it has to be something that's measurable. It cannot just be a well-wishing thing. And while I respect ministries of prayer and contemplation, I want to focus on ministries that affect other people in a physical, tangible sense. So to be clear, we're not ever going to disrespect other forms of ministry. We're focusing on ministries that directly physically impact people in the sense that you go out and you feed the hungry, the homeless, you take care of the sick, the suffering, that you represent the oppressed. So, starting from the beginning, that's a good place to define what it means to be a Christian in action in the world today. You cannot simply say that you are a Christian. You cannot simply go to church on Sundays and say that you are a Christian, because first, the path of being a Christian is really the fullness of what it means to be a Christian. It is not just a prayer said now and again or attending church now and again. The path that's been laid out by Christ is the fullness of what it means to be a Christian. It's a worldview, it's a decision, and that worldview affects every choice you make in one form or another. How you make those choices, when you decide to make those choices, what excuses you give yourself to not have to make those decisions, how you treat others, how you respond to yourself being treated. All of that together, 1,001 decisions informed by your conscience, which is informed by your faith. Right now, it's hard to be a Christian. There's so many people out there who have been inundated with stereotypes of what it means to be a Christian. They have been taught all the negative things about Christianity, and it's going to sound cliche, but hear me out. I've noticed that whatever shows up in our cinema and in our television tends to reflect the average person's opinion of what a subject might be. So, can you think of one TV show that has reflected Christianity in a positive light in, let's say, the last 10 years? A lot of them have snide jokes, crude potty mouth humor. A lot of them try to make Christians out to be giant shysters, scam artists, perverts, oppressive, narrow-minded, evil people who misuse a Bible or the traditions of their faith so that they can hurt other people. These are the stereotypes our media has reinforced. And as a direct result for that, we see that being reflected in the opinions and attitudes of the people. You see, it's true that watching a TV show won't turn you one way or another politically, and playing video games will not make you violent, but if you subject a person to a long-term, consistent message delivered while they're in a receptive state, you condition a person to be more receptive to your message and less receptive to messages that contradict that. In other words, propaganda, brainwashing. And this has been the case for a long time. We know that the vast majority of actors and a number of news and media personalities are liberals. And you cannot help but have your political leanings express themselves in your life and in your work. So if you're a staunch liberal, you're going to want to pursue things that liberals believe are morally acceptable. Homosexuality as an example, but there are others. Gender theory, social justice warriors. But let's focus on the homosexual equation. Liberals have said for some time now that this is a socially and morally acceptable behavior. And recently, through using tactics of becoming loud and aggressive, they have successfully forced this on the population that otherwise would be deeply uncomfortable. Now, these liberals may seem like a lot, but they're a very, very, very small portion of our population. Yet they've managed to flip the script on the vast majority of the population. And this is because, first, all of our entertainment methods have slowly been going what is called woke, but is in reality fake woke, because all the wrong messages are being learned, and they're convinced that they've discovered a secret conspiracy, which, if you hear them talk, I sometimes wonder how they can see themselves and hear themselves speak and say, that's it, that's the truth. Because you have to ask a logical, intelligent question, does it make sense? Give you an example. From some of the black rights activist groups, which are actually black supremacy groups, I've heard the saying that there is a vast conspiracy. And in this conspiracy, the white person is collectively doing everything in their power to oppress an entire race of people. And my first thought was, most of the time we don't even like each other. How are we ever going to collaborate on something so nefarious? We don't get along with each other. Half the time we're bored by each other. We've never been the kind of folks that are well organized, even when we have a mutual enemy. And the second thought was, my heritage is extremely white, and yet I've never been invited to any of these so-called meetings where we all get together and try to be oppressive to other people. I must not be white enough to count. You see, the real issue in this country has never been about race. It's not even truly been about wealth. It's been about privilege, but not in the sense that it's been expressed. You see, privilege exists for people with more means than need, in a greater abundance than it exists for those people who have less means. We can see this in justice, because there are two very different ways that justice is handled. If you are a very wealthy person, you're going to experience one form of justice, and if you are not a very wealthy person, you will experience a very different form of justice. This also happens if you come from a well-off family. you will experience a wildly different justice system than if you come from a family that does not possess the same health, let's say. So everybody kind of comes up with these ideas of what it means, why we have these problems going on in our country, what they mean. And the problem is, most of us are caught up in our own little world. Most of us are taught in college only enough information to believe that we're educated, but not enough education to question the things that we've been taught. You see, your educators, your instructors, your mentors, your father figures, whatever you want to call them, have been formed by the world. And the world, depending on what culture you come from, what decade you come from, has different values, different things that it appreciates, that it wants to emphasize in not only in your life, but in the culture in general. Things that were considered qualities that were extremely desirable 20 years ago, 30 years ago, are now considered chauvinistic, and vice versa. 30, 40 years ago, the idea of an ideal woman is very different than what it is today. So let's tie all of this together. Why am I speaking about such a diverse group of subjects? And the reason, simply enough, is because all of these things are at play in our culture today. All of these things are affecting how we see the world, how we react to other people. It's affected us in how we handle ourselves politically. We've stopped listening to each other because, as one musician put it, if you are a Republican, you're prejudiced. If you're a liberal, you're a libtard. We have been taught to devalue our opponents, and to not listen to their points of view because they're racist or homophobic or transphobic, or insert some other stupid attempt to devalue another person's opinion here. And it's spread throughout the world because the United States is the United States. It is a country currently without peer, although we have people that are rapidly approaching being our full equal in all ways. So our ways are currently being emphasized all over the world. Now, you and I might agree or disagree on whether a particular topic is acceptable, whether a particular topic is going to help our country. I'll give you an example. The first transgender political official has been put in office. Now, some people are saying this is a sign of change. Other people are saying that this is a sign of the country's illness. Recently, I heard the opinion that our nation is putting into office a person that our enemies would consider a weak, mentally ill person. These enemies are individuals who put strong, vicious men into power, and women in some cases. And everybody in this country has their point and has the right to exercise their point, but out of all the viewpoints I just provided, what do you think are the chances that they're going to mingle and compare notes? On the other hand, what do you think are the chances that those various viewpoints are now going to associate with other people that have similar thoughts, and only with those people who have those thoughts? Consider this with me. If you go around other people who have similar opinions to you. You will learn nothing new. Your assumptions will never be challenged. And if anything, you will become more militant because everyone around you thinks the same thing. Therefore, it must be the truth. We come back to the idea of a person being educated enough to believe they're intelligent, but not enough to question the things that they've been taught. With all of these various controversial points that I have brought up, we as Christians have to walk this path. We as Christians have to find a way to be compassionate, to be gentle, to be loving and kind to other people without compromising our faith. In a culture where if you disapprove of a homosexual behavior, that you are a homophobe. Where if you believe that people should remain chaste until marriage, that you are narrow-minded and bigoted. You have to be able to hold on to your views when the whole of the world says that you are wrong. Can you? Can you hold to the things that you hold most deep? Your very beliefs that form the core of what you mean in life, of who you are in life. You see, as a Christian, everything flows down from that. Every decision you make should be reflected by your faith. How you do your job should be reflected by your faith. Because if you're a Christian following the path properly and working, and this is just an example, you would want to do the best possible job for your boss. You would want to represent him faithfully. You would not want to steal from your boss. You would not want to speak behind his back. You would want to do well for him. Even if he doesn't do well for you, even if the man is despicable, you would want to represent yourself as a Christian because you act in a manner that is consistent with your faith. Which is another thing. Christians have been taught, correctly so, to not oppose evil. However, we end up not opposing anything, which is not what the faith taught. All of these negative stereotypes about our deeply held beliefs need to be confronted. Now, that doesn't mean it needs to be a hateful or a violent thing. As a matter of fact, it's very opposite. But these conversations need to start happening because since no one is challenging the narrative that Christians are these violent, egotistical, angry people that are hypocrites, that we are hateful and homophobic and backward and out of touch, they must be true because no one's challenging it. Aside from the fact that a reasonable, intelligent person thinking logically would realize that our faith encourages us to not trade blows with other people, you know, what do you plan to do? Do you just plan to continue to reinforce a negative stereotype until there is such a negative stereotype that you yourself cannot get up anymore as a Christian publicly? Because being a Christian is being rapidly seen as being as bad as being a Nazi or a communist, and ironically now being a communist is not seen as that bad considering all of the horrific things they've done to people. When are you, as honest Christians, walking the path going to defend your faith? When are you going to show the side of our faith where Christianity is A, not full of hypocrites, it's full of people that acknowledge that they're sinners, that are walking the path, that are trying hard to be good Christians. We fall, we pick ourselves back up. But we're not hypocrites because we're trying to help each other. It's because, B, the church is a hospital for sinners. And in many ways, it's a recovery group for sinners too. We hold each other accountable by pointing out the sins that we see. Because sometimes we are so involved with ourselves and with our situation that we can't see what we're doing. That doesn't make you a hypocrite. It makes you a person that loves another person so much that you want them to find heaven and eternity. Why be ashamed of that? Why be ashamed of this? You have done nothing wrong. You have done nothing worth the scorn that is being placed upon you. You are a child of God, made in his image, created by him. And even though you have made mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, he's still there. When are you going to wake up and realize that we have a whole branch of defending the faith, a whole system? Can you? Can you get up right now and say, I disagree, here is why. This is what my faith teaches me. And if you do that, do you have the fortitude to deal with the groans and the drama and the self-righteousness that is a part of what it means to express your faith as a Christian in this modern world? Because I'll tell you this, they wouldn't dare treat a Muslim the way they treat a Christian. They wouldn't dare treat a Buddhist this way. For two very different reasons. The Buddhists present nothing for you to be offended by, and the Muslims will straight out kill you. At what point do we as Christians begin to take action in a world today where our decisions reveal the best of what it means to be a Christian? When we stop allowing our enemies to control the narrative of what it means to be us. When we make the decision that, no, I'm going to follow Christ. Our ancestors were martyrs, fiery people who love God, who stood up against tyrants, evil men, and said, this is wrong, at the cost of their own life, sometimes brutally tortured to death, dismembered, burned alive, boiled in hot oil, cut to pieces, beheaded, executed, drawn and quartered, drowned, hung, stabbed, shot, put in gas chambers. Do you really think you have the same degree of faith that those Christians did who went to their death happy, cheering God, honored at the fact that they would get to soon be received by God? There are some among you, most of them become missionaries, interestingly enough, because they feel that fire, they feel that zeal. I heard the story, I want to say about 10, 15 years ago, of a Protestant pastor in Iran who was hung on one of their usual BS charges where they attempt to claim that a Christian was blaspheming their false religion and false prophet. So they hung him. And the man, as a martyr, didn't try to renounce his faith in order to be saved from death. The man stood up and faithfully proclaimed his faith. The man faithfully proclaimed his faith. What can you possibly do to stop a man that is willing to die in agony if it means that the thing that he holds most dear will thrive, that it will spread to others, that he will create a new generation of disciples of Christ by his sacrifices. You see, the path of being a Christian has so many different expressions at this time. For us Orthodox, the realities are endless. There are those who choose to take vows and become monks and nuns. There are those who decide to become hermits. There are those who decide to become ordained. There are those who found, let's say, soup kitchens and homeless shelters. There are those who go out and teach other people as an expression of their genuine calling. There are 101 different holy explanations of what it means to be an Orthodox Christian. Yet we suffer from the same things. I recently had a discussion with a fellow that didn't believe my church was Orthodox because we're not one of the world Orthodox. They said the Orthodox Patriarchate of Nations is not a world Orthodox church, therefore it's not Orthodox. I said, right now, not even all the world Orthodox recognize each other. I said, the world Orthodox don't recognize the true Orthodox, who don't recognize the world Orthodox. None of them recognize the Oriental Orthodox. Constantinople and Moscow are currently in schism. Jerusalem and, I want to say, Antioch are in a dispute, and Jerusalem and Greece are in a dispute. And the old believers consider them all to be incorrect anyway. And none of them want to recognize anyone else outside of Orthodoxy, period. Even though the Orthodox faith has all of this beauty, it suffers from the sin of nationalism. It suffers from the sin of elitism. And it suffers from this island fortress-like mentality. No one is perfect. No church is perfect. We all have some mistake. I've heard it said, how many of the churches in the former Soviet bloc are led by KGB leaders? I've heard it, or former KGB leaders, excuse me. I've heard it said that the Patriarch of Constantinople, even after being elected by Christians, has to be confirmed by the leader of his country, who is Muslim. It never ends. You really think Christ sits there and decides which one of his churches, Orthodox churches, are his favorite? To be clear. There's even examples of this behavior biblically that was discouraged by Christ, but it's still being practiced today, and that's by Christians. And you realize, of course, that while we're walking this path, the rest of the world is looking at us, judging us by our words, by our deeds. And I already hear people saying, well, you shouldn't judge. In this instance, it's irrelevant, because those people don't walk our path. Those people do not share, necessarily, all of our values. People who don't follow the Christian faith might feel perfectly valid in judging another person, because for them, there is no biblical injunction. For them, there is no spiritual consequence to do so. Whereas we are, at least in theory, to be held to a higher standard. This path we walk as Christians, it's not easy. Something that's worth it is never easy. Let's talk about another example. One of the things that I see that does the most damage to our faith as Christians is you come into the faith, you find this amazing thing, and you're saying to yourself, oh my, what have I found? This is amazing. I want to share it with everyone else. And so, what do? You get your Bible, and you go running out, and you go find your friends, and you start stuffing the faith down their throat. You haven't been taught really about the faith. You're a recent convert. You haven't been taught the best way to evangelize. You haven't been taught methods of evangelism. So you're so full of zeal and so convinced that there's no way anyone could resist this message that you've come to love, because you couldn't resist it. And that you go out and you charge headlong into your friends, your family, your close friends, your associates. And what happens? They start avoiding you. And why do they avoid you? What causes them to avoid you? It's because you ended up being a jerk with a book. You stuffed the faith down their throat instead of showed them the things that you loved about the faith. You tried to stuff a square peg into a round hole. And then you wondered why it wouldn't fit. You sit there and you become disillusioned because why aren't these people following along like I did? And you never stop to ask yourself, first, did you come at them correctly? Second, did you think about how you're going to express yourself? I'll give you this. In my ministry, I've preached, I've taught, I've done quite a bit. But the most lasting conversions that I've ever had were conversions where something about the way that I do or think or the way I express myself leads those people who are aware of my activities to seek me out and ask me questions. Sometimes they're people that I had just written off, convinced that I had failed in some way or was not equal to the task to bring the faith to them. You know, I like the quote that's attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, but there's all kinds of people that want to argue a point that makes no sense. They say that St. Francis might not be the owner of the quote, but who cares? St. Francis said, "Preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use quotes." Now, the reason people want to argue with this is because they can't understand how you could possibly preach the gospel without using your words. And they forget that if you come to me and teach me about the faith, yet I seek you out and find you in a whorehouse, I'm not going to assume that you are a faithful Christian walking the path. I'm going to assume that you're a hypocrite that's telling me what I want to hear. And that goes back to the very beginning of our discussion when I said, you know, the people will see you as a hypocrite. They won't see you as a person of faith who has fallen and is in the process of getting back up for the millionth time. They're going to say, see, I knew that guy was full of it. Because somehow their expectation of you is that because you're walking this path as a Christian, that you are a finished, completed work. Yet nothing else is like that. If you go to your job and you learn your job, it's not a completed work. Throughout the whole of your career, you're honing your skills in your career. If you go train martial arts or music or anything, You're not a completed work just because you've been shown it and gotten it down. You're going to spend the rest of your life honing your skills at that particular talent or hobby or, whatever requires constant work and practice. Yet, with faith, they think that, well, you are a baptized and charismated Christian. He must be done. Even masters of most of our paths in life have so far to go. The only reason they earn a title master, like a master plumber or a master at martial arts, or let's not go with trades or martial arts or musics or something. Well, there are master drummers. There's a lot of things that have titles of master this or master that. It means that you have learned the curriculum that is expected of a person who is considered a master. Usually that means that you're ready to start teaching other people. Now, for some of you who are aware, my background is in martial arts. I came to the church later in life. For me, anyway, I'm still a young guy. And in martial arts, Taekwondo was the first art I really cut my teeth on. In Taekwondo, a lot of people can get their first degree black belt, but what that means is that you are a trained student. It does not mean that you've mastered anything. It means that you've learned the syllabus that's expected of you, and you're now ready to start learning how to teach and all these other things that are connected to that while you continue to hone your skills. You cannot promote anyone to the rank of first degree black belt unless you've been awarded the rank and title of master. And this is because they want you to have a certain degree of experience in your life facing constant challenge. They want you to have the knowledge to be able to express yourself correctly, years in service. So, getting back to the beginning of our example, you are a brand new Christian. You are walking the path. You decide to yourself, hey, I want to bring my faith to other people. Might I suggest, and you can call me an idiot if you want to, I could care less. Learn about your faith first. Spend time with your pastor, priest, I don't care what his title is. Actually learn the doctrines of your church. Take the time to crack open your Bible and compare notes. Take your time to think about what's going on in your life and in the world today and how these teachings can affect you. Because first you have to begin with yourself. You have to be able to start working on your sins. And every single one of us is a sinner. And if you can't admit that, you have no business preaching or teaching. You're just going to cause more harm than good. You're going to traumatize, and you're going to create yet another guy who has a Christian horror story. They're all over the place. This pastor didn't agree with my personal beliefs, so I was scarred for life and ran away. We don't need any more of those guys. There's tons of those guys. What we need are people, whether ordained or lay people, who know their faith inside and out, live their faith in such a way where you're not afraid to share what you believe. And you do so in a manner that is loving and compassionate, but does not create a situation where you have to set aside portions of your faith with the idea that you're going to attract more people. You see, there is a middle ground between evangelism and accommodation. And what happens a lot of the time is that the church thinks that this doctrine that it's held for hundreds of years is getting in the way of its evangelization. So they set it aside, thinking, let's open the door to more people. Let's welcome more people. But what ends up happening is some peculiar quality that was associated with that church is gone. And now you look weird, off-center. I'll give you an example that folks have never considered before, at least not in the way that I'm going to put it forward. The cassock, the black robe that all deacons, priests, monks wear, whether you're Roman Catholic or Orthodox, in most churches has been set aside because they consider it to be this stuffy robe that's a relic of the past, and it's something that creates a barrier between you and the other person, and it's best if it's just set aside. Doesn't need to be there. Yet the point of the cassock in the first place was that it was a sign of your submission to God's will, not your own. It is a sign that you are not there to be someone's drinking buddy or romantic interest. It was a sign that you have been consecrated to serve God and to serve your fellow man. And you've done away with this thing with the idea that it's somehow a choice of clothing is going to endear you to the population in some way that doesn't make any sense. And so you get rid of the cassock because it's just a piece of cloth. You're a member of the clergy with or without it. And then all at once you start thinking about other doctrines and teachings that may or may not actually be of benefit to you and to the faithful. So you start to pick and choose what is and is not okay. This doctrine is not really that important. It came from an era that doesn't apply to us anymore. Let's get rid of it. So you do. And then pretty soon the people that have lived and died and grown up in that faith for a long time, generations of family, are looking at their church and they're going, why is everything changing? Why is it all of a sudden wrong to believe the things that I have believed, my father believed, his father before him believed faithfully, and so on, going back in one generation or another, in one church or another, all the way back to Christ. Except all of a sudden, if you bring up these ideas like the cassock, like kneeling to take communion in the Roman church, all of a sudden you're part of this narrow-minded bygone era that has no place in modern church life. But as you start to toss out all of these novelties, these doctrines that, well, you consider them novelties, pretty soon you're looking left, you're looking right, and the church has lost its essential character. It's lost its true identity. And it was done in a million small steps. Throw out the cassock. This doctrine doesn't matter. This church's approach is too harsh. This rule doesn't matter because it's outdated. One step after another, after another, after another, until you become this bland, vanilla church that offers no sustenance to the true seeker of knowledge, wisdom, and God. And then what happens? You end up with elderly congregations just decaying slowly. No children, because you offer them no life. You offer them no freedom in faith, because in your mind you want it to be radical. In your mind you wanted to try to bring to the people this expression of faith that you believe correct, but the grace leaves. Because one thing after another, after another, after another leaves, and you become like a bad imitation of the church that you were a part of, that was a strong witness for Christ in the world. But now, what does it stand for anymore? When I left the old Catholic churches and was received into Orthodoxy, when I had started, the old Catholics, at least the ones around me, were these group of men that celebrated the Latin Mass, the Tridentine Rite, and kept to the old traditions. That was their character. But over time, each church started to set aside the things that they had personal disagreements with. This doctrine was outdated, and that doctrine was, I don't know, brutal or arrogant or back-minded. And we don't want to wear the cassock, let's just wear the collar, even though these days the clerical collar has no association truly with Christianity anymore. The clerical collar is associated with satanic priests, and so I've even seen Buddhist monks wearing them. Even atheistic ministers wear them. Pagan witches have worn them. It's no longer an exclusively Christian symbol. But you water down and water down and water down the faith until, for all intents and purposes, there's nothing left of sustenance. Until you've watered the bread of life into gruel, and then even further into water with a little bit of what used to be bread in it, and then even further into just water. Bring together your faith. Stand in the face of all those people who cannot tolerate a faithful Christian. Again, do so with love and compassion again. When they attack you, let them. When your friends leave you, as much as it's going to hurt, let them go. You don't need them if they are not going to walk with you in Christ. Your goal is heaven, not in some distant future, but the moment you close your eyes forever. Right now, we are all being watched. We are all being judged by God. And you can consider that a harsh interpretation. I don't care. That's the truth. There is a heaven. There is a hell. Wish that it wasn't there all you like. It's not going to change a thing. There are angels. There are demons. I came to understand this because I was an interfaith minister at one time, and before I was Old Catholic, and I had gotten into the ministry of exorcism. Through my experiences, I came to understand very much there are spiritual things out there, and that they're not some abstract concept of good and evil that can be dispensed with because we choose to believe in something else. But they're there. They're real, and they do affect our people. Throughout all of this, what I have attempted to do when dealing with subjects that are controversial, I've attempted to reason with you because I want you to understand that right now your path is difficult. That you have been tricked in 101 different ways. You've been taught you don't need church. You can go it alone. But any addict will tell you, whether that addiction is drugs, alcohol, or sin, going it alone is 1,000,000 times harder than staying with the people that will love you and hold you accountable. Help help you come back when you relapse. We are at action in a brutal world. A world that hates us. A world where it's okay to be tolerant of everyone but us. A world that has told us that we are the personification of everything that is wrong with this world. It's not the guys that listen to music that advocate abuse. It's not the people that engage in crimes. It's not the people that abuse our system for their own personal gain. No. What's wrong in the world are Christians, because they're narrow-minded bigots and this and that and the other thing, and therefore they should be dealt with. Well, we've heard similar talk to this come out of a number of people's mouths. They may not say these exact words, but I guarantee you they've said similar. At what point do you decide this is too much? Now, I'm not saying that you have to put up with the politics that come with churches. I'm not saying that you have to accept the abuse that is just heaped on you every day. You deserve better. You deserve more. You deserve churches that love and churches that hold you accountable to the law of the Christian law, let's be specific. Secular law is not always just. You deserve pastors that will lead you to Christ. I didn't understand the fullness of what that meant until I became an Orthodox. Twice I've heard about major scandals in my church. And twice I've been given examples of what a true pastor will do to resolve a situation in ways that make it clear to me that I am still learning in every way, that I have not fully grasped what it means to be compassionate. And I've been at this for over a decade. Ways to heal the damage caused by people who have done inappropriate things. And not the kind of inappropriate you're thinking about. Although I can't get into the things that I hear or am told by other people. I haven't seen it myself. But I have seen how the patriarch responds to situations like this. I have seen how a true bishop heals his people, looks out for them first, more than himself. I've seen in my life something that I could only aspire to become. Those of you who have followed my videos are aware that I suffer from two sins, primarily wrath and lust. And there are times when I get so angry at things and so upset with things that I'm beside myself. I stopped making videos for I think it was about a month and a half because the current political situation upset me so much that I couldn't stand it anymore. And I was just spitting poison. I was that angry. Yet I noticed that my friends had enough love and concern to patiently bear my anger, my hostility, and to allow me to clear out the lines, blow out the lines a little bit, without challenging and arguing with me and trying to push me back into the mold. They allowed me to get all of that anger out of me and to refocus when I was ready. Now, some of them called me out on some of my BS, but none of them ever judged me. I've been at this for over a decade. And I'm still learning by the example of other people. What makes you think you've just got it all down? Be gentle with yourself. This path is going to take the rest of your life until God calls you home. So we're nearing the end of our discussion together today. It's been a long one. But I felt strongly that I needed to put this podcast out. It's my first one ever. Now, if you're just joining me, I have a YouTube series called Our Ancient Faith. My name is Bishop Nectarios. My birth name is Alexander Brown. Bishop Nectarios is my Christian name. I'm a bishop in the Orthodox Patriarchate of Nations. I live in the United States. And I wanted to have a conversation with you today. I've started fundraising to build a monastery, and more after the monastery is built and while we're building the monastery, to engage in food drives and clothing drives, to engage in what the Patriarch affectionately termed orthodoxy in action, which has been the theme throughout most of our discussion. So, if you're joining me, I want you to hit the like and subscribe button. I would like for you to please take a look at some of the other video entries that I've made. Like and subscribe them too. If it works better if you do, because YouTube has an algorithm. This algorithm will show you more of my content if you start to like and subscribe to the things that I put out. Now, I can't guarantee that I'm going to put out podcasts and videos weekly. I tried that, and in the end it felt more like a chore than a labor of love. I want to put out something that will make you love God. I want to put out something where you can feel the passion that comes out of me. I want to put out something that you look forward to hearing in this world today. I want to put out something that will help you change your life. Oh, God, it's with us every day. He's with us all the time. There's never a time when He's not there. All you have to do is listen. Just listen. Let go of controlling everything. Relax and just be. I heard the Buddhists once talk about effortless effort, and that was such a confusing thing to me because effortless effort. How do you not put effort into effort? And over time I've come to realize that if you quit struggling and start doing, quit trying to learn something and just start learning it, change the way you see it, you change the way you approach it, and you start to let go a little bit more. God loves you, and I love you. Remember, God is always present. All you got to do is listen. All you got to do is listen and let go. Let Him take the reins. Most of us can't see beyond the next choice. Sometimes if we're clever, we can see a few choices down the road, but we're always going to be surprised. Let's let the person who actually knows what our actions will do take control. Let us worry about being faithful followers of Christ. Let us devote ourselves to refining our abilities, our path with Christ, to avoiding the temptations of sin. Let us be the people that when it mattered, made the effort first and then brought it to other people. Thank you for listening to my podcast today. God loves you, and I love you. Join us on our next podcast. We're probably going to be discussing more of what it means to be faith in action in the world today. Until then, take care. God bless.